We got Fred here. Hello, Fred.
All right, so we are online. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the FLUXNET Ecological Network panel. Your host today is Gabriela Shirke. Gabriela, take it away.
Yeah, so welcome everyone to the FLUXNET ECN career panel. It's been generously co-hosted by the AmeriFlux Management Project, and we're really grateful for that. You should see my screen sharing of a map with all of our locations. This is our icebreaker. You're welcome to participate. Look in the chat and you'll see a link to Poll Everywhere. Go ahead and fill that out for us and we'll watch the map grow. So today we're grateful to host 4 incredible scientists and advocates for early career scientists today. We will discuss their experiences and collective knowledge in early career pathways, obstacles, and opportunities. I believe that each of these guest speakers have stories and resources that will improve our community's understanding of what to anticipate and how to prepare for a variety of career choices. On behalf of the organizing committee, I'd like to give Drs. Arrigo, Ignis, Casey, and Viking a warm welcome. If you want to do your electronic claps, that'll work as well. Thank you for joining us. I'll provide a brief introduction for each of our guest speakers before their presentations during the program. So again, let's see how our map is filling out today. We have a couple of folks that are joining us from overseas, including our early career organizers. Thanks for joining in, everyone. And we're happy to see that map grow. So again, look in the chat for this icebreaker. You'll see a map of locations and you can place your pin where you would like. So while people continue to trickle in and complete this, I'm going to review a couple of announcements for Zoom etiquette, as well as announce our next upcoming event. So during today's presentations, we encourage you to participate by using Poll Everywhere. So not only can you drop a link in this map, but you will be able to upvote and submit your own questions. So you'll find that link in the chat during the presentations, and at the end of all of our presentations, it's going to last about 40 minutes. We'll begin the Q&A and select from the top ranked ones at the end of the hour. A couple remaining announcements is please make sure your microphone is off just so we can avoid audio interference and feedbacks, but we encourage and are totally okay if you want to keep your video screens on. Remaining announcements is our upcoming event. We have a Twitter conference in collaboration with iLeaps that's going to be taking place on August 25th through 27th. Details and signups online and can be found online on our Twitter account. And then I'm going to drop this link in the chat as well if you would like to follow updates for that. Okay, so we have, it's about 3 minutes after the hour, right? So again, we're kind of seeing the map filter out a little bit more here, and I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I'm glad to see that we have a variety of folks that are joining us from all over. So let's go ahead and get started with our panelists. I'll stop sharing this screen really quick. So our first guest is Dr. Jennifer Arrigo, who currently serves as the program manager for the Department of Energy's Environmental Systems Science, which has a strong tie with AmeriFlux and FLUXNet as well. Prior to DOE, she led in the scoping, development, and support of the U.S. Global Change Research Program and developed climate data records and stakeholder products at NOAA's Climate Monitoring Program. Welcome, Dr. Arrigo.
Great, thank you, Gabriela, and thanks everyone for having me today. I'm really thrilled to be part of this panel and to be in such great company. I can't wait to hear the other presentations as well. I'm going to share my screen. And so hopefully everyone can see that okay. As I said, I'm really thrilled to be here today. I am a program manager with the Environmental Systems Science program within the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Science. The ESS program supports university and DOE lab research and a number of community projects and initiatives, including providing support for the AmeriFlux Management Project. So I'm the lead POC for AMP, and I've been with DOE for just about a little over a year now. And as I was thinking about, kind of some remarks to share with the panel before we get into the discussion today, I started thinking about my career trajectory, and the way that I would characterize it is it's really been kind of a career and a pathway through learning about community science. So I'm going to highlight what I think are really the values, especially to early career people, of participating in community science. And of course, by being part of this FLUXNet Early Career Network and joining the webinar, I may be kind of preaching to the choir, but it's really been central to my professional experience. So I'm going to share a mix of information, both a mix of kind of information about DOE for folks who might want to get involved with some DOE programs or opportunities, as well as my own personal experience through my career pathway, some of the early career options that I found particularly helpful. Again, the importance of community science and synthesis. And then I'll share some specific resources at the end about the US DOE. So as I mentioned, I am currently a program manager with the Environmental Systems Science program at DOE. I'm really thrilled to be part of this, primarily because it is such a broad-reaching program. So the goal is to advance an integrated, robust, and scale-aware predictive understanding of terrestrial systems and all their interdependent processes. So it's truly interdisciplinary, working from the bedrock through the soil, rhizosphere, and vegetation up into the atmosphere. And I'm really thrilled to be part of this program and to share information about it with you today. I get to work with a team every day. We have 5 of us that co-manage the program and all the projects. So we have folks that came from academia who were tenured professors, from nonprofit research organizations. People have spent their entire life in federal government. Our colleague Amy Swing came from NIH and is really kind of bridging connections between biological system science and environmental science. So it's a true interdisciplinary team. I get to learn and work with great people every day. And I really feel like program management, particularly in the US federal science space, is a really good fit for me. That being said, it took me about 15 years to land here. So I've had a lot of experiences over the last 15 years in a lot of different places that I really think has kind of helped me find my way in science. So my career trajectory was I started as a graduate student at Boston University, and that really helped me build my fundamental skills and my research foci. After that, I started as an early career tenure track faculty at a couple of smaller institutions, one being a primarily minority serving institution, Worcester State College in Massachusetts, that served a lot of first generation college students, and then East Carolina University. This is where I really started to learn about integrating teaching and research, and especially through East Carolina, which is kind of a regional university and had a really strong kind of outreach component with the community. I really started to learn the importance and the challenges of connecting research to broader impacts and stakeholders. After that, I did some synthesis fellowships. So I took advantage of some early career summer institutes and fellowship opportunities where I really learned the true science of interdisciplinarity, which I think is becoming more important, every day in science. The ability to work in teams, the ability and opportunity to work with mentors across different disciplines, and really striving for transformational research. From there, I spent about 5 years. I kind of transitioned out of academia into a staff position with an organization called CWASI. And CWASI is the Consortium of Universities for the Advancement of Hydrologic Science. And so this is a U.S. National Science Foundation funded organization that's really meant to bring together the water science community that NSF funds. So it's about 110 university members, some private organizations, partnerships with the federal government. And from there, I transitioned into the U.S. Federal Science Enterprise. So I've worked at NOAA, I've worked at the U.S. Global Change Research Program, and at the Department of Energy. And so in each step of the way, I kind of learned a little bit more about science, about the community, and about what was really important to me in terms of my career goals and my science goals. So a few things that have helped me navigate this path. I think the first thing that is really important is exploring options. I came out of my graduate degree kind of going right into a tenure track position and thinking that, you know, academia was kind of the pathway that I was on. I think more and more there are lots of non-academic opportunities. There's opportunities to work for professional societies, for nonprofit research organizations, for the federal government. And so I really spent the first few years of my career, even as I was an assistant professor, exploring those options. So joining different professional societies, joining their committees, working on workshops and webinars, and really building community networks and organizations. I can't tell you how many opportunities there are for fellowships, workshops, groups like FLUXNET, AmeriFlux, AGU, ESA, the opportunity to take part in those and really kind of hone your science and interests. It's a really great opportunity. The other thing that I really took advantage of was analytical thinking. So, you know, we all learn that in our PhD research. And I think there's really a value in then translating that into looking at your career path. So each step of the way, I kind of looked at what did I love about this position? What did I learn? What was I good at? And what I discovered was I was really interested in the intersection of science and policy. And so I wanted to find places where I could concentrate on the science, but really find the way into the policy space. I really enjoyed synthesis and community science, the big thinking. And then finally, building a knowledge-based network. Every person that you meet is going to be able to provide some value, is going to be able to provide some information. So this comes, you know, as letters of recommendations, as mentors, and just learning about their personal experience. One of the things that I learned to do, especially working with Quasi when I was working with a broad community, was just to ask questions of people of how they made their career choices or what they've experienced. And while it's not always advice, it's not exactly going to be the path that you're going to take. It's another point of information that can kind of help you decide. I did want to stress the importance of community science in my career. I found my interactions with Quasi while I was working there, and then my future, continuing service with their organization, with some of their committees, working with AMP and with FLUXNET is really, really powerful. Science is a community endeavor. The importance of networks, working groups, and the type of infrastructure and support we need, I think, is absolutely critical to advancing the science. And one of the great things about these community efforts is they are communities of the willing. So they're a really good resource, especially for early career people, because you have people there who believe in the power of the organization and believe in the power of community science. I wanted to just close. I know I just have a little bit less than a minute left, so I wanted to share some specific DOE resources for people who might be interested. ESS has a yearly funding opportunity that comes out usually in the fall, both for thinking about applying and then also thinking about reviewing. I can't tell you how valuable that review experience is. We're always looking for young scientists. We're always looking for reviewers, US or international. It's a great way to kind of meet people in the review panel, learn about the science, learn about the process, and strengthen your applications in the future. There's also a couple of specific early career opportunities. The Graduate Student Research Program provides opportunities for graduate students to go work at our US DOE national labs. And then the Early Career Research Program is a rotating solicitation, and the Environmental System Science program will have a topic this year. So I'm sure we can share these slides, which I'm happy to do, and the web links are here. I know I'm just over time, so I'm going to finish with just some quick personal reflections on kind of surviving the current economy, global pandemic, and social justice issues of today, which was in the webinar description. I'll just say that science is multifaceted and it takes all kinds. So look at your strengths, look at your interests, and bring them to the table. If it doesn't feel quite right, there's a place for you. We're all learning, so raise issues, ask questions, and think critically. I'll say over the past year, we've learned a lot about the way that we do things and about the impacts that choices have on the inclusivity and the diversity of science. We're all trying to learn. We all want to be better, and your perspectives can help that. And I'll end there.
Wow, that was really great. Thank you for sharing your experiences and really sending that message that there's a place for everybody here. It's also important to remember that these internships, community networks, and other professional development opportunities are out there, and it helps us not only understand the science, but what our own interests are. So thank you very much. And yeah, we will be creating I would say like a blog summary of these resources. So we'll collect those from the speakers after that. So there'll be some easy to share links. All right, so our next presenter then will be Dr. Danielle Ignis, who is a broadly trained plant physiologist, ecologist, and ecosystem scientist with a passion for science communication. In her lab, their goal is to answer one question: how does global change affect ecosystem function and communities of color? We're excited for her as she begins her new appointment with the University of British Columbia in Vancouver in their Department of Forest and Conservation Science, where she will be working with Indigenous communities fighting climate change. So, welcome, Dr. Ignis.
Hello, I hope everyone can hear me. Great. So thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this webinar with all the other amazing scientists. There's almost too much to say in terms of advice and all the tips along the way, and each one of us could probably give a 1 to 2 hour webinar on our journey and experiences. But I'll just give you some highlights of my journey. It's slightly unusual, even though on the surface it might seem like your kind of typical tenure track career path. So I'm keeping it super casual today, just kind of bare bones slides on my path and some advice. So as was mentioned, I am an ecophysiologist by training. I got that training at the University of Arizona, working with Travis Huxman, and that was transformative for me in terms of the training I got, and obviously worked really hard in desert ecosystems. And I also stayed at the University of Arizona in the same department, the Ecology and Evolutionary Biology department, but I switched advisors for my postdoc and worked with Peter Chesson. And so I kind of went from this ecophysiology, plant physiology world to then thinking about community ecology. So broadened my, I guess, expertise a little bit in thinking about all the species that are there. This was a very long postdoc. I'm sure many are either in a postdoc or experiencing maybe multiple postdocs. And I think at the time, gosh, when was this? I think I started 2007. So it was a very long postdoc. And I think that for me was necessary just because we, worked hard to get a grant, a big grant, and then, do some field studies, which take a long time to set up and get some results, and then to be able to publish. And then, of course, we try to land that lucrative tenure track job. So that was a very long time at University of Arizona, at least 12 years for me. It's a long portion of my life. So, and of course, the job market was very difficult. That was in the 2011 to 2012 job market. I applied mostly to R1s, so big research institutions. And I did apply to some small liberal arts colleges. And of course, that landed a job at Smith College, which is a small liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts. And I was in the biology department there. I was also part of the environmental science and policy program. Lots of things to talk about in terms of teaching at a small liberal arts college, the demands of research in addition to teaching, as well as mentoring and advising. So please ask as many questions as you can think of. I will be very candid about my answers in that particular experience there. So I think things have changed over time with the landscape of a career at a small liberal arts college. So I can really speak to that. I left Smith College and had a short stint of being an adjunct at Union College. It's another small liberal arts college, and had a short stint of teaching environmental studies, and that was a great experience there. I at the same time became a research associate at Harvard Forest, continuing some of my work in Massachusetts, but broadening the scope. And so, at Harvard Forest I finally felt like I had the space to be more of the scientist I always wanted to be. I am Indigenous. I am an enrolled member of the Coeur d'Alene tribe of Northern Idaho. And for a long time, I didn't feel that I could bring that side of me or that identity with me in what looks like this typical or standard Western science career path. And so it's only until recently where I feel like I have the space to include that identity and to be able to work with Indigenous communities and feel like it's valued. So that's a really big important step here in the change in my career path. And this is probably the worst year to land a tenure track job, and somehow I was able to pull it off and found one at the University of British Columbia, and I'm really thrilled. In fact, I'm on my balcony of my place right now. Our furniture is currently being moved in, so I didn't time this very well, but I'm here, and I'm happy to talk about, I guess, how to kind of make that switch. This is an unusual switch, right? To go from Smith College, a small liberal arts college, back to the big research institution. Happy to answer so many questions. There are a million pieces of advice I can give. And this, I think some of this applies to a lot of people at different stages or different levels of where you are. And I'll just give some that have been the most important to me. First is, don't decide for them, apply. I mean, I suppose if I'm a plant physiologist, ecophysiologist by training, if there's an animal physiologist job, I wouldn't apply for that. I don't think I'd be a very good animal physiologist. So I think, but I think it's important to don't take yourself out of the running, let them decide, make them do the hard work. Apply broadly, because you never know what could work out. And Jennifer was speaking a little bit to that, and kind of seeking out different options. As you saw in my career path, I had a short stint of being at Union College and Harvard Forest. I still am a research associate with Harvard Forest, but I also had exploring other options, looking for government positions. And I interviewed to be a editor-in-chief of a journal. I won't say which journal, but I actually, honestly, I thought if I were to ever leave the tenure track job, I honestly thought that I might make a great career out of being an editor-in-chief. So I explored that option, and it actually turned out, because of that, I realized it wasn't the right option. So I really strongly suggest applying broadly and kind of figuring out those different, things that you might have, like, oh, should I do that? Yeah, go ahead and see if that's right. Reach out when there's a position that you see. I'm on Twitter. I strongly recommend getting a Twitter account just for professional reasons. There's so many different opportunities and announcements that are on there. In fact, I'm going to say that I believe some of the success of how I landed the UBC job was because of Twitter. So I saw someone, an Indigenous new hire in fisheries at UBC, and she had posted an announcement saying, asked me questions about this position. She wanted another Indigenous colleague, and I reached out, and I think that helped set me up on this path to talking to the right people and having good conversations at UBC, which helped me get the job. So don't be shy. I know it's so hard to cold call, but I made some of the best friends and colleagues and collaborators because of cold calling and direct messaging colleagues on Twitter, which sounds weird, I know. Please make a website. If you do not have one, I strongly recommend it. I serve on various committees. One is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for the American Society of Plant Biology, and we were setting up the symposium this year, the Diversity Symposium, and looking for diverse folks. And it was hard. It was kind of hard to navigate, searching online. So please make it easy for everyone to learn all about you and all the different facets that you bring to the table. If you're new to the job market, in particular tenure track, have someone look at your application. I received some of the best advice, even just a few small words and adjectives that you have in your application really make a big difference, either by taking them out or removing certain words. And so there's a certain way of writing that I learned early on that was super helpful for me. Do your homework. My path is a slightly unusual, and I strongly believe that if I had done a little bit more homework and talked to colleagues, friends, lab members, students involved at various institutions, I would have learned a little bit more about the institutions I was choosing between as well, and would have made a more informed decision. If it is not the right fit, I do suggest leaving. I know life events and personal reasons and family make it hard to do that, but I will suggest that if it's not going well, that it might not improve. So I strongly suggest leaving if it's not the right fit for you. And there's some things to think about when you sign a contract at a tenure track job. So this strongly applies to that. And finally, I'm going to suggest bring your whole self. This took many years for me to feel that I could bring my whole self, including my identity and wanting to work with Indigenous communities. I have some advice to start that and do that as well, especially as it applies to a tenure track job and research projects. So I think the last 2 points here, please bring your whole self and everything that you represent and stand for, and if it's not supported or valued, then I think it's not the right fit. But please ask so many questions. There's a million questions here. This is tact, but I'm happy to answer questions when we're through with the presentations. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you for your very honest and candid presentation, Dr. Ignace. It was wonderful to meet you and hear your story. I definitely agree that we need to put ourselves out there. The saying is you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, right? And it also sounds like the wait is hard. I've heard from our fellow members too that you kind of have a postdoc after postdoc and you wonder, when is my big opportunity going to come? So I'm glad it's paid off for you, and I wish the best, hope everybody else is continuing to put in the work. Also totally going to advocate for Twitter. We have a fantastic Twitter account. I've seen you on Twitter. It's great. And many of our own members, PIs, and potential mentors are out there sharing their opportunities, and we're retweeting them. So if you're not following us on Twitter too, please hop on board. All right, so we're going to move on to our next panelist and guest speaker, Dr. Beth Casey. She is a physical scientist with USGS with a courtesy of associate adjunct appointment at the UC of Santa Cruz. Her research interests as a geologist include paleoceanography, marine sedimentation, sea ice, and Cenozoic climate change. She joins us today to help demystify the federal application process and discuss her experience between academia and federal career tracks. So welcome, Dr. Casey.
I'm still muted. Great. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm just going to start my screen share here. Okay. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much. I've been really enjoying listening to people's stories so far. And I think one thing that Danielle just said, she started off and said, I have a little bit of a circuitous route. And I was going to say that I have a little bit of a circuitous route. And then I started thinking, when I was a PhD student, I went to University of Massachusetts Amherst. I really thought this is the path, right? It's so obvious. I do my PhD, I get a postdoc, and I go on and I'm a professor, and then like, you know, I'm ancient and have all these students who've graduated. And it occurred to me that maybe that's not actually the normal path. It's what we think is the normal path, but in today's world, things are so different now. There's so many more PhDs who are graduating than there's positions for. That it's really, I think it's good and refreshing to sort of think about other jobs that you can hold as a PhD and still be, you know, really in a great spot. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about my path. So like Gabriella said, I'm at the USGS in Menlo Park, California, and I'm so happy to be here. I feel like I've really finally landed in my career. Like this is the right job for me. And when I came to Menlo Park, I had an NSF grant that I wanted to take with me. So federal employees aren't allowed to get funding from the National Science Foundation. So they suggested I get an adjunct position at UC Santa Cruz so that I can keep working on my NSF grant and I can advise graduate students and I can still continue with that part of my research. And that's been really wonderful. And I have only positive things to say about Santa Cruz, where I feel like, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic and I'm not really in their department, and yet they've made me feel like I'm actually part of their department, which is wonderful. So I feel like I sort of had a plan for I was going to introduce myself and then dive into this stuff. And then I got excited and just started talking about this. So anyway, just to back up a little bit, I am a paleoceanographer and I just put some pictures up of the things that I do. And so on the right, you can see there's a sediment core. And so I go out to sea. I'm planning a cruise right now to go off the Oregon coast. I take sediment cores and then I look at them under the microscope. And I use the microfossils that we can find in there in order to make inferences about what the oceans were like when those organisms were living. And so the thing on the left, I'm super proud of that. That's a diatom. Its name is Cinerema marigella, and one of my graduate students actually described that. It was a new genus and species. So I put that up there. And then the picture on the bottom right is not a great picture of me, but I love this photo because it was my first day at the USGS and I just felt like so much relief that I had this position. I started here last August, so in the middle of the pandemic. And I just feel like I'm now in a place where I feel like I can thrive. And so I really appreciate that. So to back up a little bit, you know, I was a PhD student. I thought, okay, I'm going to have this path. I'm going to be a professor. I started applying for jobs a little bit earlier than I was really ready because I thought the job market is really hard. I'm just going to apply for like some reach positions before I'm really ready to graduate and see what happens. And then next year I'll do a more broad search with postdocs and stuff. But I had a first grader who I was really, I was really worried about moving him multiple times. And so I was like, I want a position where I have some stability. And I was worried that a postdoc wouldn't do that. So I applied for a job at Iowa State University. And to my complete astonishment, I actually got the job. So I did everything wrong in the job application. I turned the application in late. There were spelling mistakes in the cover letter, like everything was wrong, and they gave me the job. So I don't know how that happens, but it did. I was there for 8 years, and in the end, I was denied tenure. And so this is, I feel like a big part of my story. And I want to just say this really loud because I feel like when you're denied tenure, this is a huge taboo subject. You know, I was sitting there watching my whole cohort of faculty who had come in and started their jobs at the same time as me, announcing on Twitter and on Facebook, like, oh, I've been given tenure. And I just sort of sat there in silence. And I was like, I can't post on Twitter, hey, everybody, I was denied tenure. Like that's not a thing. So I really felt like this is the end of the world. Like, what am I going to do? Am I just going to work in a coffee shop? Like, what's going to happen? And so I just want to say it really loudly. It's not the end of the world. There are lots of other ways that you can find yourself having a PhD and having the experiences that you've had in academia, whether that's in grad school and postdocs, actually working as a professor or doing other things. And so I feel like it took me a while to get to this point, but I'm glad that I'm here now. And I think the one thing that really helped me sort of make this transition from academia into the federal government is my mentors. And so I just want to, whoops, let's see. I wanted to share one resource that I found super helpful when I was at Iowa State, and it's called the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. I would highly suggest that you take a look at their website and see if the institution that you're at has an institutional membership. And so the way they work is they get universities to pay for the membership, and then everybody associated with that university can access their trainings and different things. And so I did that at Iowa State. It was the most helpful thing that helped me through the whole, 8 years of pre-tenure. They have a thing called the 14-day writing challenge, which is a great way to sort of jumpstart a writing project. If you're, maybe it's your dissertation, maybe it's a manuscript you've been working on. And they have just lots of things. So one of the trainings I took from them was on mentoring. And this piece of advice that I think is really fabulous, they said, if you want to do something you've never done before, you should find somebody who's just done that thing and say to them, hey, can I have a 20-minute conversation with you? And they were like, 20 minutes is so unthreatening. They're like, almost anybody would be like, yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you for 20 minutes. Like, I'm not going to give you an hour. We're not going to go out for lunch, but 20 minutes, no problem. And then ask that person, like, how did you do this? How did you get through this challenge that I'm trying to do? Because they're really the best person to help you. And so when I was denied tenure, people actually come out of the woodwork and say, hey, did you know that so-and-so was also denied tenure and you should call up so-and-so? And so I did. I had all these conversations with lots of people. And I can't remember who said it, but, meanwhile, I'm really applying to every job I can possibly imagine. But it's just really helpful to have that sort of broad definition of mentoring. So the other thing I want to talk about, I've been talking a little longer than I meant to. Okay, so I will speed things up, but I just wanted to talk about USA Jobs a little bit. And so this is the federal website where pretty much every federal job is posted. And I want to just highlight this. A lot of people don't necessarily know all of the things that it can do. And I want to just say a couple things about it. And so first off, take advantage of all of the tools at USA Jobs. There are lots of things there that you can do. So first off, start some searches, put some keywords in. You can filter by career stage, or, if there's special programs like Pathways program or something, you can filter all of those, and you can sign up for job alerts. And I highly recommend signing up for job alerts, because a lot of these federal jobs will be posted for 1 week, and then they come down. And so if you're not checking constantly, you will miss that job. And that's actually how I found the job that I have now. Even though I had contacted the hiring manager months earlier and said, hey, I'm looking for a job, let me know if you see anything. He posted this job and he didn't think of me. So I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, I think this is my job. They have a resume tool. I was really hesitant to use this because it produces the most ugly resume you can possibly imagine. And I like things to look pretty. It doesn't matter. The federal government doesn't care about pretty. So use their resume tool. They really want you to fill in. A federal resume is very different from, an academic resume or an industry resume. They want all the information. What did you do in that position? Put it in there. And also it's really important to get your salary right. And so I actually made a mistake when I put my salary in for Iowa State. I just said, oh, that's my annual salary. But I only worked 9 months a year. I had a 9-month contract. So I should have said, this is a 9-month salary. So put everything in. Be honest. And so this is a really big one. So be honest, but don't be modest and shy. And so one of the things when you're applying for a federal job, they will often give you a list of questions that you have to answer. And it'll say things like, have you ever used a mass spec before? And then they ask you to respond like, yes, I could teach people how to use this, or yeah, I use it constantly, or, all the way down to, I'm not really sure what a mass spec is. And so, I feel like it's my tendency to say, oh yeah, I mean, I've used it, but like, I don't know, there's people who are much better than me. I'm not a technician, blah, blah, blah. And the advice really is don't be shy, but also don't lie, because you don't want to waste somebody's time by saying, oh yeah, I can do that, when you really can't do it. But the thing is that with a federal job, they've got a computer system that's going to be evaluating your resume, and you have to get past that computer. And so this is one of the ways to get past the computer: answer the questions as high as possible without lying. And then also use the words that are in the job announcement. And so if it says, we're looking for somebody who has experience supervising people, and maybe you've supervised undergrads as part of your PhD program, put that in there and use those exact words. I supervised undergraduate students in my lab, just pull those exact words out, because the computer is going to be mining for those. And that will give you more points on your application. And then my last piece of advice is to apply as early as you can, because in addition to having really short pre-planned job postings, they also sometimes do things where the job announcement will be up until they get 100 applicants, and then it comes down. And so if that's the case, you want to make sure you're in that first 100. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any more questions. I put my Twitter handle up there, and I just, usajobs.gov and facultydiversity.org, I think, are my recommendations. So thanks.
Excellent overview of USA jobs and the opportunities that are out there. I also want to touch on the term secured dis route. That's a new term for me and possibly others. It sounds like it's the idea of there is a set career path. If you follow the right steps, you'll get to the prize at the end. And I hear from your experience that there's all these different career paths we can take that are hybrid approaches where you're getting the benefits of both institutions. I also really love the quote that there are a lot of ways to find yourself out there. So thank you for sharing your story. And I'm sure many people appreciate the affirmation that your story shares. Thank you very much. So last but not least, we have Dr. Carrie Ficken, a research assistant professor at the University of Buffalo, who also serves as chair of the Ecological Society of America's Early Career Community. Her research spans across data science, disturbance ecology, plant-soil interactions, and functional traits. So we're excited to host her as a panelist. She's going to discuss her experience of diverse career paths and the transitions that may come from them. And it sounds like she's also cultivated some resources for hunting new jobs and getting in some applications. So welcome, Dr. Ficken.
Hey, everybody. Let me share my screen with you. So I saw some questions in the chat about making career transitions. So this is for you. I'm Carrie. I'm a research assistant professor, as Gabriella said. Feel free to email me if you want the resources that I'm going to present here, if you have any other questions, but we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to dive in. So research-wise, my work looks at how different disturbances affect plant communities and how the responses of plant communities then scale up to influence ecosystem processes. In my current role as a research assistant professor, I am responsible for doing research exclusively. So I don't have a teaching obligation, I don't have a service obligation, although I do supervise a PhD student. The downside of this is that it's a soft money position. So I have some startup funds and I have 2 years of salary, but after that, I have to bring in my own funding. From a more personal perspective, I have 2 kids. I had one in grad school and I did field work up until I was 9 months pregnant, and it was the worst. But of course, the reward was worth it. And then I had the second kid at the end of my postdoc. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about my professional trajectory. The first part is academia, and it's actually rather straightforward. After undergrad, I did a bunch of field tech jobs. I entered into a PhD program. I did a postdoc in Canada, and then I started my professorship this past fall. Where things start to get interesting is that the next part is not going to be in academia. I am right now in the middle of a career transition. So at this point, I've kind of taken the leap I'm not really sure where I'm going to land. It's really scary, but I can tell you I'm at the point where I am genuinely really excited about the opportunities that are out there. So I thought I would just talk to you a little bit about my personal journey. I know that this is a perspective that I could have really benefited from a few years ago. You know, I saw people who were in academia and I saw people who had careers in industry, and I didn't quite know how to get from point A to point B. The caveat, of course, is that these are just my experiences. Your mileage may vary. It's just one story out of many different ways to have a successful career. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with part 2. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've gone about making the career transition. And then I'm going to go back and reinterpret some common academic experiences to highlight more of the transferable skills that we gain with these experiences. Okay, so how am I making this transition? It's taken a lot of soul searching. It's been, you know, really years of me thinking about this. And it started with just a hint of maybe I would be open to something else or something non-academic. And then once I started thinking about my personal and professional values and priorities and really like articulating them clearly, I started to notice that maybe those values didn't actually line up with the values of academia. And maybe even more than that, they could be supported better in a career in industry. So in addition to a lot of soul searching, I spent a lot of time reading internet resources and putting some of them up here for you. But again, I'm happy to share this slideshow. I spent a lot of time at career development centers in the universities I was a part of. They do a lot of professional development webinars to give you ideas for what different jobs are. You know, what's a project manager? What's a data scientist? And one of the things that I really struggled with is that I felt my whole world was academia. And if I'm going to leave that world, I felt like there were a million other jobs and careers and identities for me to pick from. I didn't know how to just like blindly pick from a new identity from a hat. And over time, you know, I stopped actually thinking about it from that perspective. I stopped viewing it as having to choose one job or one trajectory or one identity that I would have to commit to forever. I realized that in industry, it's much easier and it's much more common to change jobs or even change complete industries. So what that means is that you can kind of fine tune where you're headed, what your next role might be, based on the particulars of what you like in your current position. So I could work on new projects. I can work in a new industry. I can learn new skills with a job change. And each one of those job changes might even come with a salary bump. So that change in perspective for me was very freeing. Okay, so now we're going to go back and think about the common experiences people have in academia and talk a little bit about what skills you're actually gaining with these experiences. So developing research projects, developing research programs, that's the big one, right? So you are learning skills in project management and problem solving. You are developing, leading, managing projects across their full lifespans. So this means that you're identifying goals, you're preparing budgets, sometimes you're hiring and managing small teams, you're meeting deadlines, you're preparing final reports or final products. If you are, you're probably working with a lot of data, you're probably learning to analyze it. You are gaining so many skills, synthesizing complex data from different sources, cleaning data, wrangling data. You're learning specific statistical techniques or learning to use different statistical software. You know, you're learning to do hypothesis tests and regressions and model selection, etc. These are all, you know, really important and highly valuable skills in data science careers. And you're also probably learning these skills independently. So that's demonstrating that you can gain new knowledge, gain new skills, and apply it in new scenarios independently, which is very valuable as well. I imagine a lot of people here are something along the lines of environmental scientists or ecologists. And I can tell you that there are many companies out there that really value and want your combination of technical skills and environmental knowledge. There are a lot of startups. There's clean tech, ag tech, green tech, sustainability tech. There's everything. And all of these industries are looking for creative ways to work in the environment. So if you're teaching or TAing, you're gaining experience with leadership, science communication, especially if you're teaching lower level or introductory level courses. You're meeting deadlines, you're problem solving, you're gaining experience public speaking. If you're writing grants, you're learning to market yourself. You're again working on science communication, you're gaining data visualization skills. If you're going to conferences, you're networking with senior scientists, you're networking with different stakeholders and learning how to communicate again with different audiences. If you're writing papers, science communication, you're showing that you can complete projects, right? These papers are the unit, the final product for academic projects. The product is different than the final product in business, but you're demonstrating that you can kind of close on a deal. So publishing papers shows that you can finish a project. If you're training students, you're gaining leadership experience. You're gaining experience managing teams. Again, science communication. In academia, you work a lot with what are called cross-functional teams. These are teams where you aren't you're not really the supervisor of the people that you're working with. You're all kind of peers. And so that means you have to learn to create buy-in for the product that you're creating, right? You have to learn how to motivate people to work on your project without being able to threaten that you're going to fire them or something. So that's a really valuable skill. So this was kind of a whirlwind. I'm saying all of this to emphasize that there are many interesting, fulfilling, engaging career opportunities in science, in research that are out there. And you are smart people. If you have gone to grad school, or you're in grad school, or you're past grad school, especially, you have the skills and knowledge that are so applicable to many different careers and many different jobs. And the hardest part is that you have to learn to operate in a new world and a new culture, and that's scary. But I'm doing it, and I know you can too. So I'm done.
That was a fantastic summary. Thank you so much for transposing those skills for us. I think that's great. And also, thank you for the affirmation. We need to hear that. Like, we, as graduates, and like being in academia and research, we know how to problem solve. And I feel like we do sell ourselves short quite a bit. So we don't have a lot of time left. Thank you again, speakers, for fantastic presentations and for agreeing to stay a little bit after the hour. So I think we'll hang out 15 minutes after the hour and take some of these questions. So just to jump right in, if you haven't already submitted your question and the poll everywhere, please do, or upvote the ones that you would like. So we're going to go ahead and start with the top one, which is, can you talk about the process of deciding on a career pivot? Who did you consult? How long did it take? And how sure were you before taking that plunge? So we can start in any order. I'm going to go ahead and ask if maybe Dr. Arrigo has something to start with, as you are our first presenter. Otherwise, we can play popcorn.
Sure, I can start, and I'll say I really enjoyed all the presentations and discussions, and several of my fellow panelists said things that I was thinking in a much better way than I could. So it's been really great. I've had a few different career pivots. I started in academia. I went to kind of nonprofit science management, and now I'm in federal science. And one of the things that really resonated me with what Danielle said was, if it's not right, leave. So, each time I've made a pivot, it's because something didn't feel quite right. And so I did spend, kind of a long time, in each case, my job search took somewhere between a few months to a year or more, when I was trying to make what that next step was. And I consulted pretty much everybody. What I tried to do was in each step, I really kind of started with a core network and kind of looked at, okay, where am I at? What is it that's, not quite the right fit here? What do I like about it? And who are the kind of people, who do I know that's kind of adjacent to what I'm doing now that looks like a better fit? So I really tried to kind of just build on a network and hear personal experiences. And I did the same thing. I mean, I applied when I was looking at moving from academia. I applied, to nonprofit research groups. I applied to the federal government. I wish I had had Dr. Cassie's USA Jobs tips 10 years ago, because it is a tough process. And I think I was, I was sure that it was time to make a change when it just got to the point where I just, I felt like I wasn't happy, and I felt like I wasn't, kind of reaching my potential. And so I was always kind of sure that I wanted to make a pivot. And then it took me a while to figure out what that pivot was.
Do any of our other panelists, would you like to share your experience?
This is Carrie. I'll say a few words. For me, as I said, it's kind of been a multi-year process, and it took me a lot of time to come to terms with wanting to leave, because you can do postdocs for a long time. And I started reaching out to people, through LinkedIn, like all of the people that I went to grad school that I hadn't really kept in touch with. In my experience, I could remember the people that were in academia, but other people kind of dispersed, and I had to go out and find them and see what they were doing. Talk to them and said, what are you doing? What's your job? What do you like about it? How is making the transition? And I totally agree. Like a 20-minute conversation, it's really doable. Kind of awkward at the beginning if you're like cold calling somebody you don't know, but everybody's used to it. And then it's kind of an iterative process when you're learning to, for me at least, it's been an iterative process in terms of learning to reformat my resume or repackage my experiences in language that makes sense to people in business that might have never worked with somebody that has a PhD or an ecologist before. And there's not, I don't think that there's like, the time is different for everybody. Some people might be really bold and just like get a whiff that something isn't a good fit and go out and find something good. And for people like me, it's taken a little bit longer, but all of my experiences, even like up until the ones that the new skills and the new experiences that I'm gaining, like, yesterday, last week, are providing value in how I sell myself for the next step. So, yeah.
All right, thank you for your feedback, panelists. We're going to take another question where our list is tending to grow. So the next top question is, what advice, guidance, and tips do you have for international students, especially those that are coming from Africa? Dr. Ignis, would you like to take this question, considering you have an appointment that's taking you over between two countries?
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting, being always, born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and always having a job in the U.S. and Canada is obviously not far away. And my fellow colleagues here, we all say the same thing, which is, how different could it be? It's not that far, right? It's just a short hike over the border. And it is, an international move is truly a difficult international move. So I'm in the throes of it at the moment. but I think I'll go back to, yeah, I think we're in, it's difficult times, right? To be, I think, international, to actually be able to travel international. And of course, there are different, I guess, traditions and in cultures and ways of doing things at various institutions. And I think what I can say is, I go back to some of my other research, which I think applies to a lot of different facets, is reach out to people. And if you're a student looking for an advisor, I wouldn't leave it to applying to the program or the job and just seeing how it goes. I would reach out early and maybe often, maybe not every day, but if you don't hear back, reach out again and talk to students in the lab, postdocs in the lab, different students in different labs. If that's what the question is based off of, if you're thinking about grad school or postdoc. So I think that's really important, is to reach out to as many people as possible.
Would any other panelists like to comment on this?
I can say something. I've worked with several international students at Iowa State, and I guess the one thing that I find really disappointing is that jobs in the US federal government are not available to anybody who's international, which I think is really disappointing. But I think, I'd sort of echo what Danielle said, and also just say, don't be shy. Like, apply for any job that you are legally allowed to apply for, because there are a lot of places that would sponsor you. And I think the other thing is, departments are looking to increase diversity right now. And so this is a great thing, use that to your advantage. As an international student, you can sort of bring something to the department that they probably don't already have. There was one other thing I was going to say, and it just keeps jumping out of my head. So I'll stop, but if I think of it, I'll bring it back up.
No, these are great comments. And FLUXNet, we are an international community. We have strong roots within the United States where we get a lot of support, but we are trying to build our community and our network in these questions. If you can incorporate an international perspective in any response. Go ahead. Yes, Secretary.
I was going to say, the other thing that both of my PhD students have been able to do is, after they graduated with their PhDs, they were able to sort of extend their visa for 3 years, I think it is. And so definitely take advantage of that. And it seems like there've been lots of creative ways that they can do that, not necessarily staying in academia, but doing different jobs that relate in some way to their dissertations. So take advantage of that if you have it.
That's great. We have two questions that are kind of tied right now. One of them specifically for Dr. Casey. So others, I would love to hear your feels on this as well. But with imposter syndrome, how do we deal with it? Thank you for sharing your experience. I have a lot of issues with imposter syndrome. If you had similar issues, how did you move forward after being denied tenure?
Imposter syndrome is huge, and it's a very real thing. I definitely have suffered from it. I think one of the things that gives me a little bit of comfort is knowing that I'm not alone in that. I feel like whenever I'm a verbal processor, and so I talk all the time. And when I share my experience and say, oh my gosh, I can't possibly do this. Who am I to think blah, blah, blah. I often get that echoed back to me from somebody else who I think, why would you feel that way? I feel like, for example, I'm in my position now. There's an emeritus person in my group who is a giant in my field. He's super famous. And he has the most imposter syndrome of anybody I've ever met. He'll be on a call and he's like, nobody wants to hear about this. I'll stop talking. And I'm like, what? And so I think that, I think it's fine to have imposter syndrome, but I think it's good to remember that it's also good to have a little bit of humility. And, you have to sort of think, okay, I have this training. I think one thing actually that helps me is to go through what I've done and look back at my experiences. And this sort of, if I have to do an annual report about my productivity or something, and I make this list and I've done this, this, and this, and I think, oh, I have done all this stuff. Like, it's so easy in the day-to-day to forget because I'm constantly thinking like, oh, I'm behind on this. I failed at this. I didn't do as well on this as I wanted to. But if you really are force yourself to stop and think, there's probably a lot of skills and successes that you can celebrate about yourself that I think it's just important to take that time and remember that, and, you know, try to get positive feedback from anybody. Like, I think that's really helpful too.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Sorry. Yeah, Dr. Rigo, I see you unmuted yourself.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna, I was gonna echo everything that Beth said, and I've struggled with it as well, especially kind of moving from kind of one area of science to another. I always feel like I'm the least experienced person in the room each time I start something new. But I think a lot of the advice that we saw about writing resumes and making applications, and really being honest, but not modest or shy. One thing that I do is, I keep all my cover letters for every job that, I applied for and got. And I go back and I read them and I think about how I presented myself and why I thought it was a good fit at the time, why I thought I was a good fit for it. And, just kind of reassure myself and, try to think about it, constantly, like reminding myself of the things that I do and the things that I bring into the job, and remembering that everyone has a different path and a different set of experiences, and, things work best when everybody brings those to the table. So it's a lot of self-reassurance, but it is a constant thing.
Absolutely. I think our success really depends on the connections we have with others to lift each other up. So hearing that, it encourages me to share some compliments. It might, make or break someone's decision to stay in the sciences. So let's really pass that positivity around. Our next question is directed for Dr. Ignis. Do you feel that you started feeling comfortable showing your true self, i.e. scientist and indigenous, because the environment and the department was supportive, or because you slowly felt more comfortable just within yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I think it's almost the other way around, which was I felt so, I guess, silenced and muted and excluded, and it just wasn't, that perspective just really wasn't valued. I think being at an institution where I'm the one of, I don't know how many, 2 or 3 Indigenous people out of the entire faculty, and yet never being asked for my Indigenous perspective on anything, even when they were trying to develop a land acknowledgement. So I think, to me, it was just really clear, and and there's other stuff was happening too. I just think, it was very much like I had to leave. So I'm pushed out and felt I had to leave. So it I think what that made me feel like, in this kind of, I'll touch on maybe a couple other questions that would come up, which is, I definitely had an existential crisis when I left, and I thought maybe I'm leaving academia altogether. And at all these different stages, grad school, postdoc, yes, all these stages, I always consider leaving. I always have some sort of crisis or personal event, and I'm like, maybe I should get out of this. What's my science worth? Who cares? And there's always something really profound that pulls me back. And I was trying to actively leave academia. I'm kind of going through Carrie's list. I'm like, yep, I exactly translated my CV to all these different jobs and explored all those options and talked to many different people, and none of them felt right. And to me, and then this job came up, and I think what I felt was, when I left Smith, was, oh, well, there's no restrictions on, I'm just going to be myself and do what I want. If I have this research associate position at Harvard Forest and people are wanting me to bring my full self, then I was going to do it and make sure it happened. So I think 2 things happened in the past year and a half. Was, one, I, in a sense, just didn't feel that that I didn't feel like I had to hold back anymore, and it was just going to be my true self. And if no one liked that, then I would leave, wherever that was. And then also, space was created, people started valuing and asking for that perspective. So I think a couple of those things, now being unwavering in it. And so if I'm ever in a place that doesn't value or support me in that, then I'm out of there.
Thank you so much for speaking from your experience, and I hope that we continue to make spaces for all kinds of voices. So we have just 5 more minutes. It would be great if we can end on a broad question. We did have quite a few questions. So I think a good one is about the future, right? Like, what are we looking forward to? So our last question will be, each generation of scientists creates changes in the field and the culture of research. What do you foresee will change within our own scientific institutions in the next 20 to 30 years? So this may include lifestyle, representation, research directions, and new disciplines. With that, I'd like to start with Dr. Ficken, please. Would you like to reflect on this question?
Yeah, this is a really good and really hard question. I can tell you what I hope will change, which is that I hope that academic institutions move away from training people that look like them to do things exactly like them, and to start seeing the people, the students that they're training, as different people with different important perspectives, and kind of trying to tailor their development towards a diversity of careers. Like, we are graduating way too many people, way more people with PhDs than there are positions for. And that has been the case for a while. But I think now you have a lot more, especially after the pandemic, there's a lot more visibility, I guess, in different career options. You've got professional societies that are actively trying to promote diverse career pathways. Yeah, so I hope that we see a broadening of like what we can do with high level, environmental, ecological STEM training.
Thank you. Dr. Arrigo, would you like to provide your perspective next?
Sure, thanks. That is a great question. And I would echo what Carrie just said. I think especially this past year and a half, we've seen a lot of recognition that we need more space, and we need to be thinking more broadly about science and who's involved. Changes within the scientific institutions. I'll mention, I think there's a lot of interest in interdisciplinary science and transdisciplinary science that's been growing. I think one of the reasons that I left tenure track academia was that I was really interested in interdisciplinary research and synthesis research. And I had people at my institution telling me, well, don't get involved in those projects or those working groups, because it takes a long time to get that stuff published, and you have to really work and get tenure, and then in 10 to 15 years you can think about the big science questions. And so I think that's changing, and I think the ability to network and work across work globally and find connections and find cross-disciplinary research, and seeing that being valued. I think also, the changes within, the U.S. agencies in particular of, fostering, diversity, inclusion, equity. Programs are thinking about including those factors more and more when evaluating institutions and evaluating grant applications. I think a real recognition that, to really accelerate science, we need to bring everybody to the table, and everyone can't come to the table in the same way. So I think it comes down to what Carrie said about, training people that look like you to do things the way that you've always done. And I feel like that's changing, and I feel like, organizations like FLUXNET and early career research networks, and the voices and the advocates that you can be for yourselves and for others and for the science is part of that change.
Thank you very much for your perspective. Dr. Casey, would you like to go next?
I'm not really sure how to answer this question. I feel like academia is sort of in crisis right now. And I feel like, especially coming from a Midwest university where the state, it was a state university and the state didn't want to fund it because they felt like, academia or universities were just elite liberal institutions that weren't worth state dollars. And at the same time, demand for universities is higher than it ever has been. I mean, it's like we're at this point where it's like if you're a high school student in the US, the expectation is that you're going to go to college. And so I feel like there's got to be some kind of reckoning within academia, both at that level and then also in the whole tenure system, where we have these departments that are filled with people who've got tenure decades ago, and they don't want anything to change, and they don't want anybody new to come in. And, these new assistant professors come in and want to change things and want things to be more open and balanced and allow you to have work-life balance, allow you to have a family, allow you to, not have to work 70 hours a week and have a stay-at-home spouse who's taking care of everything for you. So I feel like there's a lot of changes that need to happen within academia. I don't know whether they will happen. I don't know how they will happen, but I really hope that just talking about things and being vocal about saying this needs to change, this is wrong, is maybe the way to start. Yeah.
Very positive changes. All right, and Dr. Ignis, bring us home.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Pressure. I think to kind of follow up with all of that, I think we're at a really unique time and an important time. I personally feel like, as someone who was about to leave and then who's been pulled back and starting this new position, I do see the change. It's slow. It is, as Beth said, that yes, we have these older tenured faculty who don't want things to change, and new faculty come in and try to bring these new ideas, and there's a lot of pushback. And what we're going to see is that the more we hire and the younger we hire and the more diverse we hire, the change will come faster. So I do see that is happening. So I think that is a reason to be optimistic. It won't happen overnight. I also see great changes in the way that diversity, folks from different underrepresented, marginalized communities are starting to be valued, supported, and included. Not only that, but different ways of knowing. So indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, different forms of communicating, like moving beyond the standard peer-reviewed publications in Western science. I think there's really a movement now for some in that to think about how we include these diverse forms of audio, video, art, storytelling, because that can only make the science better, right? If we have more perspective. So I think we're seeing a shift, but it's, I will be a very strong advocate for that and push for that. And I always will be. And so I'm starting to see more movement on that. At the same time, I also think for academia that there is a push as well for valuing diversity and equity and inclusion work. So those conversations are starting to happen, maybe not everywhere, and there will be pushback, right? But I do see and hear the conversations happening of how do we value that work and make sure those are folks who do so much of that work are not overburdened, but valued in that process.
Wise words from all of our panelists. Thank you very much. It sounds like changes are being encouraged, fostered, and we're getting new approaches to mentorship and lifestyles. They're being heard and in some ways worked on, right? But we are in a unique time, and you're right, things are moving slow. People are getting their job opportunities slow, but it'll come. And I think that we should just keep ourselves motivated by supporting others so that we don't leave, right? Like, let's not give up on ourselves, making space for new perspectives, and definitely just ask somebody for 20 minutes at a time, right? I'm sure all of you you've all told me too that you're open to hearing back from our viewers today. And I want to say thank you one more time for spending this time with us and sharing your stories. So electronic applause to our panelists. We're really grateful to have you here. So I'm going to go ahead and close up and say thank you for your contributions to our community and these wonderful conversations. So for our audience, we are closing this webinar. We will be posting the recording on our YouTube page through the AmeriFlux YouTube page. We're going to kind of summarize these fantastic answers into the blog post so it can be easily shared with other people that you feel like would benefit from this. So thank you all again for another fantastic ECN webinar, and enjoy your weekend wherever you are. Bye, everyone.